Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this special session at the San Sebastian International Film Festival, presented by the Global Entertainment Marketing Academy. We are excited to explore the intersection between art and marketing with you today. The Global Entertainment Marketing Academy is a non-profit organization dedicated to celebrating and empowering the creative minds driving entertainment marketing across TV, streaming, music, gaming, sports, and film. We want to give a special thank you to José Luis Rebordinos and Sayo Arriba for having us in this festival this year. Crafting a movie poster is an art that combines creativity with marketing insights, ensuring a film's essence is combined and communicated instantly and memorably. A poster is more than just an image. It's a powerful tool used to generate interest, convey a film's essence, and engage audiences. Today, we are honored to hear from James Verdesoto, from a founder of Indica Entertainment, who has designed over 1,000 iconic posters, including those for Pulp Fiction, Ocean's 11, Asbestas, Y Tu Mamá También, and the list goes on. James will share insights into how iconic movie posters are crafted, discussing the creative and strategic decisions behind them, and offering perspectives for filmmakers and professionals on working with design teams to create impactful marketing materials. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming James Verdesoto.
Hello. Thank you. So I wanted to thank you, Sergio, for inviting me here and having this film talks, thoughts and discussions conversation is very exciting for me, and I want to thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure meeting you and also producing this mini presentation. So first of all, I just want to read a couple of things, thanking my team in New York, especially my business partner, who really wanted to be here, who would have been sitting there. And he and I created Indica about 30 years ago, and we just celebrated our 30-year anniversary as a company. And Vivek is responsible for kind of keeping the company thriving for 30 years and using his business smarts and marketing savvy and business experience to kind of keep us in business and also excited and productive and also providing impeccable customer service. Because I think without customer service and keeping the clients happy, it's very difficult to sustain a business as an artist. And we're both artists. We have a commercial business, but in the end, we really live our lives as artists more so than business people or business executives. Like we can play those roles, but in our hearts, we're still just artists learning every day, and using everyday life to inspire us. And also, for us, all of our projects are experiments, and also keeping our sense of wonder and excitement alive is a challenge. And I think working on so many posters over the years and watching so many films, it's very easy to get not necessarily bored, but to stay excited about every new project. And since every film is a different story, a different place and time, and a different subject, it's basically like going on an experimental journey every time. So I would also like to thank Nathaniel Lopez from New York as well, who's our head of digital creative, does all the Photoshop, and also manages a design team. And he started with us as an intern, and he's been with us for 15 years since then. So we'd like to keep a very close-knit family unit, and that's it. And let's see. So let's start. So before I go into the presentation, I just wanted to give you a little bit of some of my credentials. I've worked on over 1,000 print campaigns for over 30 years. We've worked with major studios, including Universal, Sony, Lionsgate, Warner Brothers, who championed the Ocean's 11 franchise. In particular, I wanted to just mention Masih Rafani, who's the head of creative advertising for Warner Brothers, who championed the Ocean's 11 franchise, who's worked with us on many films like Last Samurai, and to name a few. And then on top of working with Masih, who always strives for marketing and creative in the highest levels. And so it's always a treat to work with him, because he kind of brings that kind of, he brings us up to his level, and constantly goes out of his way to have us all grow together when we're working on projects. We also have been working with Netflix, Peacock, Hulu, and Amazon, who are kind of the new players, and also they're kind of the new movie studios in a sense. And so adapting to that world has been difficult but exciting at the same time. And then a little background about me. I was born in Quito, Ecuador. I was born in Quito, Ecuador on the 4th of July. And what's really funny is the cross street of where I was born was called Americas with Estados Unidos. So I was born parallel to Estados Unidos and America on the 4th of July. So I think I was destined to move to America and be part of like the American dream. And so I thought that was really kind of set me up to kind of live a cinematic life, and also allowed me to kind of dream up the kind of life that I wanted to live, and constantly working in the arts. And so I moved to the United States when I was 4 years old. I grew up in the Bronx. I went to the High School of Art and Design in Manhattan, and then I also attended Parsons School of Design on a scholarship. And while I was at Parsons, that was in the 70s and the 80s, where art, fashion, design, international culture, and cinema all fused into one large creative bubble. And that was kind of part of our kind of education. The city was part of our education, but also being in a school on an academic journey in that environment was very enriching. And it kind of set me up for the rest of my career. And so some of the work you'll see includes, like what we talked about, Pulp Fiction, who won the poster for the Best Campaign of the Year when it came out. It was the equivalent of a Clio Award. And also Ocean's 11, the teaser poster, won Best Teaser Poster. And then Men on the Moon also won International Poster of the Year. And we've won over 15 Key Art Awards, which are the equivalent of Clio's. The Key Art Awards was the name of the institution before it became the Clio Awards. Okay? And also, I'm also happy to share that Vivek and I, my business partner, became Academy members. So we joined the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences 2 years ago. I mean, we wouldn't join, we were invited to be part of that in the publicity and marketing section of the Oscars. And so the journey into the cinematic world just got a lot bigger and more exciting, because we get to screen every film that's released in the marketplace. We get to attend screenings, and we get to vote on all these films and interact with filmmakers, interact with producers, and kind of expanded our vision of the entertainment industry. Okay, so let's start. So I wanted to start with this image because it's a little bit vague, but at the same time, it tells a story, right? It's a screen grab. It's one screen grab from a movie that I decided to do a mini experiment with. So if you look at the image, you'll see there's a protagonist sitting in the middle of the room. There's an empty apartment. There's gilding in the decor. She's kind of smoking a cigarette. And then obviously it's Audrey Hepburn, right? And this is from, you can move on to the next slide. This is from Charade. Oh, I thought the Charade title was on there, but anyway, it's Charade from 1956. Should have been up there. But so that's one frame out of 150,000 frames in a film, right? So if you go back to that frame for a second, that one moment was an experiment to choose what is our favorite moment out of those 150,000 frames. And Vivek and I chose this as an experiment, but also we decided to turn this into a painting and a filmic painting that we presented in an exhibition on cinematic art. Okay, so let's move forward now. So here's an example of two moments. This is a unit photograph from The English Patient, and this is a desert scene from The English Patient. Just two standard unit shots that you would normally see in a catalog for a film or in a publicity still, right? And so when referring back to that single image, part of my job is to find that moment where almost that aha moment where like, okay, that's a poster or that's a poster. And I usually, after screening a film, there would be 5 moments that stood out for me, that I would have a connection with the subject, that I would maybe fall in love with the scenery or the art direction or the costumes or the character as I'm watching the film. So, and then the next page, you'll see that those two scenes were used to create this poster, which was a teaser poster that launched The English Patient into the world, right? And what was interesting, if you go back for that for a really quick second, when we were first, when I started working on this campaign, which was a very early Indica project, we worked on this with Saul Zantz, who was the producer, and he's known for that kind of David Lean aesthetic, which is this epic view of cinematic proportions, like the biggest you can get on the big screen, right? And so one of the things that, from a marketing perspective, we were told is do not show the desert, because people don't like seeing desert movies. People don't want to see anything Egyptian or like anything cliche about the desert. We were asked to avoid, because in those days we were told deserts don't sell tickets, right? And like all movies that depict the desert flop. So stay away from that. So my job is to take that information, take this kind of the essence of this romantic moment of this character looking over his shoulder while watching the film. And then if you go to the poster now, you'll see that the desert is there, but you don't see it, right? It's very subtle. He could be anywhere. You feel the desert, you feel the romance of the moment, and a lot of this, the look of this poster is very evocative of perfume advertising from the 90s, right? Very Ralph Lauren, very kind of like lifestyle, safari culture. So it has nothing to do with, a man in the desert who's burned and, and suffering. And this is more like what's in his head about this romance that became the epic romance of the year, and also, I think, broke a record and won 12 Oscars at the time, including Best Picture. Okay, and then the next one. And then this is another moment, and in this case, you have a kiss. I was in a marketing meeting with the marketing team, and we were trying to figure out how do we create a final poster for this movie. And we know we wanted to sell the romance, so we were looking at the trailer. Usually when you work on a film, you're also witnessing the creation of the trailer, which we don't really work on trailers. We mainly handle all the print. I'm trained to work on print. And we were watching the trailer, and we were behind schedule on the final poster. We had already released the Ralph Fiennes poster, and I looked at the screen and I said, freeze that moment. Can I get, so we froze that moment, looked at it, and I felt that kiss was like an epic scale kiss in that David Lean universe, and it's romantic. And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see that was adapted into a poster, right? So that became the final poster. The grain was since it was the resolution was a little lower, the grain represented maybe sand a little bit, and then in the distance you see, if you look back here, you'll see a little sense of a desert, right? So you still have the desert, but you don't see it. It's still not there, but you feel it through them. You feel it through the grain, and then it's really like an epic scale kiss that kind of ties into the copy line, which is in love, there are no boundaries. So this is kind of like unlimited open scope. Okay, the next one. Same here. It's this very, very kind of emotional still from a film, a unit photograph, that also, while I was screening the film, resonated and with me, and also was very emotional. I was like, okay, there's something there. Let me kind of dig into that image and play with cropping. I love cropping images, and you really don't know what's going on, but I really got excited about what was happening with his face, because it reminded me of like Polish advertising and Polish posters, and Polish advertising for movies, which are usually very emotional and very dark and shocking to the eye. And so if you go to the next screen, so that became the poster for Asbestas, which is a film that was released, I think, 2 years ago through in Spain, and it was a Spanish-French production. And so I kind of like, what I really enjoyed about this image was the mouth. So now the mouth, through the croppings, I reconfigured the mouth and kind of made that the focus. These people were less important, but this kind of like torture, this moment of a man being murdered, and kind of keeping the dirt from the floor as part of the grain, and then the color being kind of unique to kind of a thriller or a mystery moment, keeping the audience guessing as to what is actually going on and maybe wanting to know more. Next. Same here. So this was for a moment where this particular character thought that he was, when you come back as reincarnated. He felt he was a reincarnation of Marilyn Monroe. So that was the kind of the protagonist. And so he had this kind of like lipstick on. I mean, not lipstick, but you could sense that it could have lipstick on, kind of had the blonde hair, and this kind of like sexy moment of this character in a bathtub. And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see that it became the poster by cropping and flopping. We added a gun to create a little bit more mystery. And this was produced by El Deseo, which was Almodovar's company. And we launched this in Cannes. And it was very eye-catching, and people were talking about it, and it was very exciting. It was all over the billboards. And then so it was also used in Argentina as its main poster, along with another poster that we released that included other characters. But sometimes you get lucky and you have an image that resonates with a broader market, and sometimes kind of works all over the world and not as local as most posters, particularly international posters, kind of stay in their own territory. And so advertising sometimes helps expand the market and create excitement over a subject or a film or, okay, next. So, so the art house film from the 80s and 90s is the era where I kind of got my beginning in movie advertising. While I was a student at Parsons in my, I think, a junior year, I entered a movie poster contest, and it was a horror movie, and it was a poster contest that I won first place, and I got paid $800 to design this poster, and it was a major release, and it kind of opened up well. Most of this is all marketing. It wasn't even a great movie, but it was this image that I created was hand-painted in airbrush over a photograph, and this was completely created without Photoshop, right? All this is like pre-Photoshop, and so, you know, for a 20-year-old to kind of have the opportunity to have a major release by Orion Pictures was very exciting at the time for me, and also having something in such a commercial world be in black and white was also very rare. You know, in the 80s, everything was in color, and so you don't really do black and white if you don't have to, right? If it's not part of the concept. And in this case, just a little fire and this kind of creepy face. I don't even remember where I got the image from, but I know I painted over it in airbrush at the time. And this is a really funny story. It's very fast, but I created this image in airbrush, which is completely hand-created Photoshop. So it's like Photoshop that's done with a brush, literally with paint in a brush that you kind of spray all the detail, and you use layers like you would in Photoshop, but these layers are all cut out by hand. So every aspect is like stenciled, like a silk screen, and then it all comes together. And I was on my way to deliver this to the printer, and I had stayed up all night working on it, and at home in my room, had a setup there, and I, since I hadn't slept all night, I left the original art in the subway. So I got out of the subway, and I was on my way to the printer, and I realized I left the envelope on the subway. So I had to run home and do the whole thing from scratch all over again, with no sleep. So those are the kinds of things that kind of you have to kind of like take on these journeys and these like moments that are, you know, that keep your adrenaline moving. But that was kind of a sad but kind of funny story. The next one. And then these are very early films that this distributor at the time, Miramax, who now has this very odd history that I don't need to talk about too much. But if you look at what they were doing, which was very exciting, this is very early on where they were taking films from Mexico and really releasing them in America, right? So in this case, using the pedigree of Gabriel Garcia Marquez and the, you know, the quality of an international product, and then using like the lead actress as the main cell. And usually in those days, in the 80s, women were portrayed as like, you know, as, you know, objects, right? It was almost like always have a sexy girl on the poster. It sells tickets, and especially if it's a European, you know, in Europe, you know, you're just always seeing pretty naked ladies and bare shoulders and soap commercials, and it's part of the culture. So I grew up thinking that that was important, and my whole style evolved from making things sexy and attractive, and there's always has to be a pretty girl, even if she wasn't even in the movie. My bosses were like, oh, make sure you know, find a way to get a girl in there. It was really ridiculous if you think about it now. So if you look here, again, there's a pretty girl, and this was a scene from the movie that I recreated, and I did a photo shoot with a body double, and but these are all scenes from the film. And this was a international Mexican film. This was a British film that had 10 different directors, and I had to figure out how do I incorporate 10 stories and then unify everything with this one icon, right? And make it sexy, make it exciting, and also the whole movie was had no dialogue. It was just an opera aria, and then these short films of these major directors. I mean, all these were like the best directors in the world at the moment, did their own. And then this company released this in American theaters. And so I remember being in the theater, and I remember people like being shocked that this was an opera and that basically there was no dialogue and they didn't see any sexy girls in the movie as much as, well, they did see this scene, but they were expecting like some exciting Marvel movie. And you walk in and there's this opera playing and there's this like no dialogue, 10 short films by these obscure directors that the American public probably never heard of, but they were attracted by the posters and they thought, oh, this is really exciting. I feel like I'm seeing something new and different and kind of independent. And I remember some people like screaming and walking out because they were in shock. They were like, opera, and they were like, just ran out because opera was not mainstream at all to a mainstream audience at the time. And then here you have another example, and the reason I put these in here just to give you like how my art school background had allowed me to really construct a poster almost like a painting, right? With like the foreground, the epic scope, this kind of middle ground, this background, this kind of very Avatar universe, where like you would really look at a traditional Disney or an action film having this formula, kind of, this is like a formula for movie posters. This is also kind of a formula for like a Marvel universe, right? So it's kind of interesting to see how far back and how these were such obscure kind of films that were brought to America through these very kind of courageous distribution challenges and made them into new and interesting product. And then again, you'll see a lot of sexy girls in these posters. But even this was a documentary by Errol Morris, who's now he's a major force in documentary filmmaking. That was his first poster. What's fantastic about this is that he freed a man from prison with this movie. So they found the man innocent and they freed him from prison after Errol Morris kind of proved through the documentary that he was innocent. But you know, again, my bosses were like, oh, make it exciting, make it sexy, and make it interesting. I don't want to see a boring documentary. And in those days, documentaries were boring. So no one really expected a documentary. You wouldn't really run out to the movies to see a documentary, but they created a genre called a docu-feature at the time. And so setting it up and marketing it as a docu-feature and having this kind of like approach, this copy line is difficult to read, but there's like a funny approach to that. So this is like Water for Chocolate. Scandal was also a big British film, obviously Mexican film again. This was kind of based on a famous Man Ray image. So a lot of my art school world kind of showed up in a lot of these posters. Here you have The Crying Game. This was like a watercolor for like a very interesting, like female skewed travel log. A lot of movies in this era were kind of a new genre of like, okay, go see the movie and you'll experience visiting France or you'll experience visiting, you know, countries from all over the world. So international cinema allowed a spectator to walk into a theater and kind of escape from his or her world into this kind of narrative storytelling that was, you know, the cinematic universe. Again, an Australian film, a Spanish film. This is a really funny story because this was actually a poster that people went to see and she wasn't even in the movie. And also, but this was a reinterpretation. Remember, I'm reinterpreting as a graphic artist what a feeling and an emotion through marketing can do to a movie, packaging it. And the good thing is these are all very tasteful and elegant and not kind of offensive in those days, I guess. And a lot of distributors were telling me, oh, your poster's better than the movie after they saw the movie. They were like, oh, we really like the poster more. And then again, The Piano was like an early film that I got a chance to work with one of my favorite photographers, Deborah Turbeville, and I got to shoot the talent. And that's when I started working with major budgets where I was able to hire photographers that I loved and work with the actual talent that would, get brought in, and I would create sketches, and then we would do photo shoots for concepts. So what makes the movie poster iconic? So this poster is iconic. It's a very memorable, and there's a backstory to this poster. And so we'll see now as I go through the slides what makes this iconic. And then I'll let you know once we see it. Okay, so this is the first thing you saw was when Pulp Fiction completed its photography, maybe a year before the movie got released. There was something called a completion of photography advertising. So you basically, when there was an exciting producer or a director, you would announce, okay, we completed the photography, and so please, I was asked to create a campaign that kind of sets the tone for the film. And so I kind of created this kind of whiskey bottle, which is very Tarantino, kind of like, and then Bender was the producer, and so kind of we created like a fictitious wine whiskey label that kind of announced the film and announced the completion of photography. There's the distributor, and then the copy line was, if you like your Tarantino straight up, right? There's something coming, kind of thing. And that was the first image that was released to the public. Then here, so after reading the script and after getting all excited with this kind of new product, this new hot director who came from the success of Reservoir Dogs, and he was kind of the it director of the moment, right? And people were excited to see what he's coming up with next. And so if you look here, if anyone wants to know, the pulps were novels by Raymond Chandler that were created from 1896 to 1955, and they were printed on wood pulp, which is kind of this grainy paper, almost like newspaper, that in those days were contrasted with like magazine glossies. Everything was very slick and glossy in that era of Hollywood. And so these books, these like paperback books that people would almost carry with them on subways, on buses, and they would get all distressed and folded because you would keep them in your pocket pretty much. So that's where the idea came. That's where I came up with the idea for like this kind of the frailed edges and the sexy protagonist and the icon, the female icon, and this was the inspiration. So these were the inspirations for what became the photo shoot, which you'll see here, included Uma Thurman in this kind of a similar pose. Here she's with a gun, and then the other characters in the background. Okay? And then also, this was really a major influence on pop art, American pop art, because they started appropriating, image design that was part of the culture of the moment, and then kind of bringing it and making it into commercial. Okay, and so here, my department was asked to do sketches, photo shoot sketches. So we knew we were going to shoot Uma Thurman. We knew we had a shoot date, and there was a deadline because the film had just been accepted to premiere at the Cannes Film Festival that year. And so we needed a poster fast, and I mean, we had a deadline, so it wasn't like we can sit around and just have fun creating whatever we want. We really had a deadline, so this photo shoot was scheduled. And so in this case, we did these sketches. These are my hand drawings, and these are also my hand drawings, and I had a designer with me at the time, Todd Tarhan, who helped construct these looks and worked in Photoshop. In those days, I didn't really do a lot of hands-on Photoshop. I still don't do a lot of hands-on Photoshop, but I can art direct, and I do these by hand, and then we scan them in, and then they get composed in Photoshop. All this was kind of done using a Xerox machine and cutting things with a knife here, right? So we kind of lifted all these material from those pop books that you were seeing before, and that's how the idea was constructed. And so here you're seeing the outtakes from the photo shoot. And then we actually, in those days, you really want to take advantage of a full shoot. So we'll spend like a half day shooting this setup. All these props were done by a prop artist. There was a costume person on set. The lamp, the lighting, everything was kind of was staged by the photographer, whose name is Feruza Hadi, and he was an LA-based photographer at the time, and who, you know, really masterfully constructed and took that sketch and turned it into this reality. And the lighting is kind of perfect, and her expression. And so while we were editing all these photos, we ended up choosing this shot and having, you know, the gun and the cigarettes and the paperback on the floor, on the bed, excuse me. And if you go back to the sketch, this is really funny, but also a little sad, that I was instructed to make sure that she is partially naked, right? This is like the thinking of marketing through the male gaze, right? It's like, okay, make sure she's wearing a man's dress shirt so you can evoke that she just, you know, is having an, you know, this kind of interlude, you know, and she's wearing the man's shirt, and make sure the shirt is open and make her look as sexy as you can. And so if you go back to the photo shoot, I mean, Uma Thurman was like, I'm not wearing that. I'm not doing that. What do you know, like, that's not my character. I'm not interested in that. So luckily we have wardrobe on set that the celebrity or the actor or the protagonist can then choose what fits for them and what they would, you know, feel comfortable wearing. So luckily we had multiple outfits. I'm happy she kept the shoes, because that had a very kind of like noir, kind of like, you know, throwback quality, but everything else was modernized, right? You're seeing her attitude, and she felt free and comfortable, right? You wouldn't be comfortable if you're like half naked, you know, trying to like pander to someone's idea of what you're supposed to be. So that was really kudos to Uma Thurman for really sticking with her guns for that and creating a comfortable, powerful woman that is in control of her power. And then from that moment on, I created Indica with my business partner. That's Vivek, and we named the company after a book that was written by one of Alexander the Great's generals. That kind of his job was to travel the world with Alexander the Great and kind of document all the aesthetics of the world that they're conquering, but embrace those aesthetics and become part of them as you conquer them. So we thought that was a fitting name. My business partner is from India, so everyone thought that that had something to do with India and indie films, which it really didn't. And so this is a section called an anatomy of a poster, which, what is actually the next slide? Okay, perfect. So you saw the Pulp Fiction breakdown. That was kind of an anatomy, but more kind of like why it became iconic, because it had the DNA of a substantial amount of reference, a substantial amount of thinking behind it, but at the same time, it was material for an artist or a designer or a marketing person to kind of like play in that world and kind of reinterpret it for themselves and not be working from nothing, right? You have materials and research, and in this case, this is the Ocean's 11 teaser that won the best teaser poster of the year. This was done with Masi Rafani from Warner Brothers, and my business partner Vivek had a lot to do with this. These are actually my legs that we shot in our studio. And what's really shocking about this is here you have, in those days, and there still are, some of the biggest stars in the world: Julia Roberts, Brad Pitt, Andy Garcia, Matt Damon, George Clooney, and we're kind of like showing their feet. And so, of course, you're thinking, oh my God, that's never going to pass. My business partner at the time, Vivek at the time, was like, I'm not presenting that because it's going to be, they're going to think we're crazy. So we presented it, and Masi was super excited about the idea, and he went with it, right? And we explored further. And so that became the DNA for the whole franchise of Ocean's 11, which you'll see coming up next. right? So that DNA is constructed from all of these inspirations that were kind of things that I learned in art school, with the Swiss design, constructivism, Bauhaus, all these movements that were part of like my design education and where I went for my ideas. So if you look at these beautiful black and white images, they're exciting, they're colorful, they have the DNA of that poster. Saul Bass was a major influence. This kind of 70s aesthetic with black and white minimalist photography. This was the original Ocean's 11 with the running guys and the big stars. And what was interesting, I found also this album cover, which the whole music for this album cover was inspired by the movie Ocean's 11. See these running people? They included that. They had the big 11. So this became like so I had worked with my design team, and I was like, oh, I love this, I love this, I love this. Let's see what we come up with. And so that becomes part of our process. And so then that's the evolution for this whole franchise of imagery, right? So you have, this was kind of inspired by Saul Bass's Vertigo, and we were, this is the one that Steven Soderbergh was super excited about. He loved the throwback quality. He loved that it had a reference to Vertigo, and so that was like not designed for him, but he was super excited about that. So that's when multiple pieces of key art were used for different purposes. So that was if you think of it, the teaser, this was the payoff, right? Where you show the full cast. And then here was Ocean's 12, which is an evolution of this with the feet, and this was used as a major campaign. And then here you have an example of Ocean's 8, which was like a new configuration of an all-female cast. Again, here we did a throwback poster where we showed the actors' faces, and we're really playful with the types, sticking with that 50s aesthetic. Here you're showing the cast in a much bigger, this is probably an international campaign. This was something that we didn't design, but the designers that were able to finish this used our DNA to create this version. And then this is an international poster where obviously you see more of the faces, and it makes other people happier to be able to sell. And then I'll just go through this. These are just a slide of some of the posters that kind of stand the test of time. And for me, what standing the test of time means is that these posters kind of represent a time and a place in cinema, but also, because the quality was so high on the product, right? So you have like an Alfonso Cuarón, you have a Julian Schnabel, you have a this kind of Mary Harron, and these subjects were right up my alley, and they were really exciting, right? So you have this like Javier Bardem, you have this like, exciting typography that was inspired by fashion advertising. This was also the way big type was used here, was kind of new, which now is a little more common. And here you had like Andy Warhol's silver Elvises used to, I basically just put her head on the Elvises and recreated it. And then again, this we did for Massi Refani as well from Warner Brothers. We took another ballsy move, which is to like, okay, here's our first poster, but we're not going to show Tom Cruise. And of course, that's going to create like, from a marketing perspective, you're like, oh, how can you not show Tom Cruise? He's the biggest star in the world. But of course, Massi kind of is, understands strategy and build up and aesthetics. So here we were more interested in portraying this kind of epic Kurosawa moment, right? With the charging armies and the flying, blood and the dirt. And then Vivek came up with this, my business partner came up with these like kanji that we used on the sides of the poster that kind of branded the whole thing. And so it's a really good example of color branding, this kind of, without these, I don't think it would have been as exciting and new, right? So you took the Kurosawa aesthetic, you kind of have this like graphic treatment that made it fresh and also international, and also was this movie was released in Japan first, so we had to kind of make sure that everything read properly and everything made cultural sense, significance, and these little kanji here are actually made up of little different Tom Cruises here. If you look closely, you can see his face in these. So, another funny story is the wife, I think, of one of the heads of the Warner Brothers was driving by Sunset Boulevard and saw this poster. And she was kind of like, well, what is that? She was kind of in surprise. That looks very violent and that looks very scary. Why are we doing that? And I don't really like that. It's very kind of shocking. And so, then we created this poster for her, which showed the face and still had the same aesthetic, but was more like, okay, now that's a Tom Cruise movie, right? Like a big face. But because of the aesthetics and the DNA that was kind of developed, it's easily translatable. Same thing with this. This was for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. These were inspired by fashion advertising, from Italian fashion photography, and then also these having the word Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in kanji in the background as a graphic device also helped make this unique, and also the being playful with the characters. Here you have a princess with an appetite for destruction, right? So you kind of have this kind of really beautiful, powerful woman here, and then also, so each character poster had a different. This one I don't like because this looks like a banana or something. It's very weird, but it's Michelle Yeoh at the time. I should say the sword is a little disturbing to look at. And then, here other posters that stand the test of time. You have the Jim Carrey poster that has him interacting with the typography, who became Andy Kaufman and took the title from his name and kind of grabbed it, and kind of now he's, interacting with the poster, creating a fourth dimension there. And that was done for Universal International, Warner Brothers International, I'm sorry, co-partnered with Universal. And that also won a poster for the Best International Poster of the Year, a Clio Award. This was a Training Day campaign that kind of showed, again, this kind of artistic fashion advertising, photography for an action film. This became like a very now it became a formula for showing a protagonist and a buddy film, right? Where there's like the big star with the secondary character. This was just kind of a rom-com that showed this kind of playful nature of breaking that, the fourth dimension. And here, obviously, it's just a very obvious interruption of this big face of a movie star, kind of in a dramatic cropping that created the emotion there. And then again, this was a poster for, this is a horror poster. I'm blanking out on Guillermo del Toro's for one of his early movies. And again, there's the icon that we created that doesn't exist in the movie, but it's inspired by the movie. We built this, shot a model, and constructed these letters out of foam core. Titus, which is a great photo from a production still that captured the essence of the movie. And then here, kind of capturing this post-apocalyptic world where you're kind of feeling everything but not seeing it, And then going back to these, which you're already familiar with. And then I think the one thing that's important is collaboration. And everything that you're seeing is a collaboration between marketing departments, between designers, between filmmakers and producers. So it's really important to make sure that that's like a key ingredient in the success of most campaigns. And here, I'm just going to go through a quick run through of like how we approach a campaign from start to finish, right? So here you have the Mauritanian was a great project, a very important political film, and I'll show you what we did with it. So that's the film. We get a synopsis of, the prisoner from Guantanamo Bay, blah, blah, blah. They want the movie to be a major awards contender, and then basically we have to take this synopsis pared down, and create a campaign from there. And then we get a creative brief that we do internally of all the points that get covered on all the comps. Also they also give you details as to like how to portray characters. Here you have Jodie Foster playing a cynical character and is closed off in the movie, right? So she's kind of internal. You have Tahar, which is the lead actor, who plays a specific character. Make him as charismatic as possible, because in those days, in that time, we wanted to push him for an Oscar role, and we wanted to push her for an Oscar role. I think she got nominated, he didn't, but in the end, and create iconic imagery, make sure it's outdoors and doesn't feel like it's all about a prison cell, and make sure that it looks exciting and not at all indie. Do not make this indie, right? So we get these rules to work with. And then we kind of go to our library and go to our visual materials and start finding, okay, so we want to make sure that they have a best picture quality, because we want to obviously, it's an Oscar movie, so you want to find reference material that'll take it to that level. So these were just inspiring posters that I thought were good targets for that. And then we started to find a little bit more innovative posters that would kind of have us go a little bit of a departure from what's standard. So these were all references from poster books and photography and different moods and tones that are all relevant to the subject. A little bit broader innovation where you have these kind of like obscure photography, layers and blurs and Polish poster advertising, typography, color, mood and tone, and eventually I think this became a major inspiration, and this as well. Some of these, the quality of all these end up in the art. Again, a little bit more out there innovation where they're really graphic, very playful, and you'll see how some of these were integrated in our presentation. This was a great poster that Masi Rafani did. We didn't work on this, but we really wanted that essence of politics and emotion and the humanity behind that and the shocking aspect. And then we do internal sketches here. So this is kind of like hand-drawn sketches that I would do like in a little thumbnail format. And sometimes I'll like photocopy stuff on my phone or cut and paste. Sometimes I'll draw. Sometimes I'll just use a straight photocopy. This I did completely on an iPhone. This was done on an iPhone, on a Xerox machine. This is completely done by hand drawn, right? So they all have different techniques. Again, working straight over a photograph. Here is like a sketch for a photo concept. It's kind of like, so these were all kind of inspired by all those references you saw. That kind of like kept us excited. These were some sketches that one of our junior designers did, and ironically, his sketch became the final poster. So kudos to him that he was able to like just out of the blue create something based on the reference that was exciting for the whole team, right? Because we all vote on these and we all pick what we want to take to the next level. So it's not like, and that's where Vivek comes in. He's a great editor. So I'll do 100 sketches and he'll help pare those down to 25 to execute. That makes sense to him and that communicate properly the subject, because I would somehow go off and think that things look great that other people can't imagine or see. So he helps guide the editing process. And then this is our internal buildings. First we do is we rough them out internally as quick as possible based on the reference, sometimes very close to the reference, and kind of in a rough way to see if they're going to work before we decide to kick them off, right? Before we decide that it's not worth taking to the next level, or they're not working, or it's too depressing, right? And then you go to the next one, and then this is what we eventually ended up presenting. So if you get an idea, see here in the first presentation that was done, you see the flag, you see the prison bars, and you see the interaction of the type and the emotion of that character. which is very similar to that Midnight Express image that you saw. This is obviously like a unique way of showing the talent. It's kind of very kind of distressed ideas, iconic, featuring the cast more. It's kind of very emotional, political, shocking image. Again, this I did with a Xerox machine, printed it out. I do a lot of these by hand to see if they're going to work and give that hand quality. It's going to be emotional. And then I think there's another page. There's some more. So we usually present between minimum 15 to like maybe 40 comps for a poster, and for the first round. And then that's the last one that they wanted to include the cast and the teaser and the payoff. And then that's the final campaign where we maintained a lot of the grit. You know, the title is a lot cleaner than it was in the sketch. You know, you really have this works on many different levels, because you have the prison bars, you have the American flag, and then you have these like tears and the emotion of this character breaking through that oppression, right? And the humanity and the desperation of his character. And then obviously in those days, and now we really have to start applying the horizontal format to everything, because it's, you know, everything gets pared down to a vertical and a horizontal for a billboard or for an ad. And then obviously there's like international territories that want to see the actors, right? So then we would do a campaign that kind of features, you know, a thriller. This was an Academy campaign trying to push a trade campaign for Academy, where you really capture the essence of the character. Ideally, they're all doing the same thing in the same scale and proportion, so it kind of unifies. And then there's like a payoff with all of them together on the poster, which is very traditional, but it functions. Collaboration, what was this? Okay, so this is an example of, go back to that title for a second. So what I was trying to say here is that these three examples that I'm going to show you are campaigns that I created, that my company created, directly with the directors, directly with the producers, right? With no distributor involvement yet. And so what that allows you to do is start early on and start developing a brand and an identity and something that everyone is satisfied with, right? So you make the director happy because it really honors his or her film, and then at the same time, you're trying to excite the marketplace. So when they start going to festivals, there's already a buzz and an excitement for a packaged product, right? And so these are examples of this director, Frederick Chang, we've done all of his posters, not all of them, the majority of his posters. We started with Valentino, which was inspired by like a 50s fashion advertising, and then it evolved into Dior, which shows a similar DNA with the black and whites and the red, you know, shows the artist involved in the process and this kind of dramatic dress. And then this was like another fashion movie. So these are all fashion movies that kind of created his brand as a director, that he was involved in all of these from the beginning. And since he was very happy, and when he's kind of trying to sell his films, ultimately the marketing teams and the sales agents get all excited as well, right? Because then everyone's happy. They love the film. These are usually really good films, so it's not like they're trying to fake anything. So, you know, there's kind of sexy, fun, playful, very kind of retro or very emotional here with this kind of this kind of iconic silhouette of Beth Ann Hardison. And then the next one is another director that we have a lot of collaboration with, Jeff Orlowski, who I think some of these films premiered in Sundance, and he's kind of like, he won awards in Sundance, and, you know, so he was taking as a filmmaker and his team, they were taking the documentary film to another level, which is kind of a political movement that allowed the viewer to get involved in the emotion that the cause evoked, right? So here you have this like epic collision of these icebergs that were fully intact, kind of separating with a little journey here, very epic, very large. Normally you wouldn't see a documentary have this kind of dramatic kind of recreation, right? And then that did really well. It won major awards, and then he did another version about the corals and the same detrimental kind of foreshadowing of coral reefs disappearing. But so we maintained the vertical type, and we kind of had this epic scope again. The little character on the boat here is reminiscent here, and then he designed this series as a trilogy. So in this last poster that we did for them, we kind of maintained the same color as this. These are actually very similar in the sense that this is kind of the same poster, but the ice has already melted. So really, you see the ice is kind of disappearing, and the desperation of the filmmakers trying to save it or capture or document this, because part of this movie was about documenting through photographs the destruction of the effects of climate change, and capturing proof that it's happening through the documentation of all these films. And here again, if you go back to the beginning, and this is the end, and now they're chasing time, which is about doing something before it's too late, and their project. So it's a very fascinating story. Next. What were we saying? Okay, and then again, this is the same director, again with the social dilemma. This premiered at Sundance, and he went to Sundance without a distributor. He had distributors in mind, but kind of wanted to package his film, so we created these campaigns with him that showed different aspects: the teen aspect, the effects on young people, and then this kind of like the way that social media is taking over people's lives. So they were very emotional, but it's still mysterious and iconic, and not traditional documentaries. Perfect. And so now we're in kind of the digital age, right, where there's multiple arts that cater to different audiences through algorithms, right? So you would assume that the art is less important, right? Because it's very minimal, it's small, and it's digital. But in reality, there's new opportunities now, because there's like a world marketplace, right? So you have Netflix that's kind of all over the world. So we were hired by India, Netflix, to create the Archies, which was an American product, and create this exciting kind of 50s kind of aesthetic. And so you'll see how this campaign evolved. But this was kind of like one of the teasers of the campaign, using the three main actresses. Yeah, and then this is all the reference that was used. This was like, the comic book. This is Norman Rockwell. This is kind of, I think, the Beatles, or from that era, fashion play and retro qualities. These illustrations from the 50s were the main inspiration for this campaign, especially these two here. Next. And then from there, we take those and we create sketches using some of that material. These were all done by hand and also digitally. And so we use the actresses' faces, use scrap that we find through stock photography, and create those moments based on that material to kind of get that. And then these get approved by the client, and then we schedule a photo shoot and shoot everything like we did with Pulp Fiction. And then we get back these. So these were the final teaser posters that were used. So you see, again, the DNA is very easy to distinguish, but the feeling is right, the aesthetic is perfect, the coloring is all unified, and it kind of makes it contemporary, and also the obvious retro quality.
And then these are more campaigns. This was kind of inspired by a Beatles album cover. This was inspired by the comic book cover. Again, comic book cover. And then the last slide is kind of like a, this kind of like horizontal kind of posters that connect with all the different characters intermingling with each other. And these were used for outdoor advertising. They were used in social media. So if you really think about it, we actually produced about 25 pieces of art for this campaign. And we worked on it for about a year, starting from script stage, right? So they're not like small potatoes that you're dealing with, right? You're really dealing with celebrities. You're dealing with, a very highly aesthetic director. And the attention to details, all that is hugely important. And so you'll see it's reflected in the outcome, right? And whether the film was a success or not doesn't matter, because at least everyone was happy with the creation of the product. Thank you. I would do it. We ran out of time? Okay.
There's no time for questions, I guess.
Does anyone have any urgent questions that
I
they
do
have
have.
to ask?
Can we? No?
No?
Not time. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
We just over.
Pleasure.